Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is. I do hope it finds you well. My name is John, and I am an author, and I'm coming to you here on yet another Monday to talk a little bit about mental health and how it impacts my work and writing. The one I have to start off, what I'm going to be talking about here today is one near and dear to the heart of many authors, writers, creatives, really pretty much anything in life, and that is the lovely little condition called imposter syndrome. That is, roughly speaking, the feeling that when you're working on something that you're an imposter or a fraud, you've tricked somebody, or just in general, that's you're kidding yourself. You're not actually very good at what you're doing, whatever exact form that takes, and I've seen it take a number of forms. um for me, it's often coming down to like feelings of what I've written is not that good, people are not that interested, they're not going to take me seriously, I'm never going to be successful at this, and all that is usually the form that takes for me. I've heard different people, some people are worried about they're going to be you know, laughed at or called a fraud. I think looped in with imposter syndrome is other things like I've seen people, talking or heard others, they feel their stuff isn't original enough or unique enough or exciting enough, and etc. etc. And that's it's honestly one of the, I'd say, the by far and away the hardest things to deal with, for lack of a better word, with regards to creating in particular. But imposter syndrome works its way into work. I mean, I've certainly had it come up where I start feeling like I'm not very good at my job, I'm going to be found out and fired and blah blah blah, all that other stuff that races through the brain when it feels like it's certainly linked to my anxiety. But I think even people without some form of anxiety condition can still get imposter syndrome. I think it's just natural with putting yourself out into the world and worrying you're going to get found out for what you really are. Um, some things that have helped with that, as really one of the things that very much helps with that is whatever your profession is, I would encourage you to go online and take a look at interviews of people that are unquestionably successful and or talented in the field you're in or looking to enter, and you will be surprised how often you find them talking about their own feelings of imposter syndrome. um, I mean, as a writer, I mean, one of my favorite authors is Neil Gaiman. I have seen interviews with him, and he is a tremendously successful, and in my personal opinion, a tremendously talented writer. And yet, I've seen interviews for him where he talks about having imposter syndrome and feeling like he's a fraud or going to be found out. So it's everybody. It's not just for people that start out. There's always the reason, always that weird little feeling that someone's gonna, pull aside the curtain and see, you know, and see you're just a, trickster from Kansas or whatever it is at Wizard of Oz, or whatever form that happens to take. So that's certainly one of them, is just knowing that you're not alone, and even very successful people have a lot of the same fears helps. Um, and a lot of it is, at least for me, also comes with, I think there's a natural reaction when you've spent so much time on a project. I mean, someone reading your book, your book, or seeing your drawing, or seeing your play, or song, hearing your song, or whatever form you're looking for, um, are seeing it for the first time and seeing the completed work. And behind the scenes, you're seeing all all the hours of practice, all the, for myself as a writer, there's, I've written a rough draft and sent it off for feedback and taken that feedback and go back and reread it and edited it and reread it and edited it and reread it and edited it until it got to the point where I'm pretty success, I'm pretty happy with, um, I'm at least somewhat happy with what I'm doing. Um, and what I'm looking at, but that sort of brings with it a what I feel about my books, particularly my first one, honestly, because it just there was such an evolution over the 10 years I was working on it, much more so than my second book, where I very much have sort of a love hate relationship with it. Like, I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of it. I'm glad to have it out there, but also I've spent so much time with it and editing and tinkering and editing and tinkering and changing and rewriting. And is this word the right with this word? Maybe, and all the other, just a little preview of some of the noises that go on my head sometimes. But you get to that point where it's like, someone's going to pick out all the flaws, all the errors, the fact that, I've been reading the first couple of in my little story time Thursday. I've been reading the first couple chapters, 2 chapters in so far of my first book, and I've found various typos, and Lord knows how many times I've edited it, and we're all worried about getting found out about that. That's you know, it's helpful to take a step back, or I find it helpful to take a step back and realize, I wrote two now. I've written two coherent books. You know, are there typos? Sure. Are there things that I wish could have been, better, or they didn't quite come out how I imagined them in the movie that plays in my head? Absolutely. But they have a beginning and a middle and an end. They have characters that are understandable and have journeys to follow, that you can follow, and a threat and a system of a magic and a setup of the worlds and this, that, and the other thing, all of which I created. And that gives me the opportunity to, and that gives me a lot of pride, truly a lot of pride. And that sort of taking a step back and looking at, rather than the minutia and sort of the love hate relationship I have with them, and I think that a lot of creatives have with their work, because you know, we have to imagine all this stuff, and what the human language is limited to what it can convey, as opposed to the the dreams or little movies or images we have in our heads. So, but taking that step back and realizing what I've actually created. Um, and a lot of the sort of sub things that come along with it is really just sort of realizing that they're just excuses to make, like worrying about, like, it's not original enough. What is originality either? I mean, if you really boil it down, to some degree there's not really any such a thing as an original story. It's all, you know recombinings and reimaginings of, you know of what has been written before. True originality, true, like, creative, there's never been anything like this before, is a very rare. I mean, we all have influence a lot of times, completely unintentional. Like, we see, we absorb things in our lives. We see stories, we see the news, we read books, watch movies, watch TV, listen to music, and all this data is going through our head. And that leads to times where, we're going to sit down and create something, and some of those things are going to, filter through. They're, from our lives, from the other media we've absorbed, and that's not a and that's not a bad thing. I mean, you should always keep an eye out for, you know, obviously you don't want to go into the territory of, like, there is certainly a threshold somewhere into deliberate copying or plagiarism, and that's not good for a variety of particularly legal reasons. But, you know, if you got influence from this, or you combined, part A of this story with part B of this story with part C of this story into your own story, that's everybody does that. And on that rare occasion, those rare occasions where true creativity and originality occur, that's no guarantee that it's going to be good. Good and original are not the same thing. A lot of people seem, there's sort of a this drive that a lot of people seem to think it is, that, they equate with, I want to do something original, I want to do something original. What they're really saying is they want to do something good. And, you know, great, do something good. Try to be original. Don't be plagiarizing or outright copying, but just because you have influences and, you're retelling or recombining a story. I mean, how many times have some stories, I think one of the most adapted works of literature has been is Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol, which is, I don't know how original that is, even whether, what precedents off the top of my head Charles Dickens was drawing from. But, you know, while there's obviously straight adaptions, that sort of idea of sort of learning from your mistakes and being, taken to learn is, has been adapted and reimagined in so many creative ways. Not just because you change the setting and it's, this, that, the other. It's, anyway, I'm rambling at this point, but you get the point that, you can take and reimagine stuff sometimes deliberately. Even you can deliberately reimagine something, and it can still be intelligent and creative. You know, it pulls the same idea, but one of my favorite adaptations, to stick on that point for a moment, of A Christmas Carol, is the Doctor Who Christmas special from 2010, 2011. I don't remember what year it was, but a Christmas special where they adapted it, where, it's time travel instead of ghosts, and a guy who's, trying to hold on to the last day of his lost love instead of really holding on to money, and just change, like, it's such a smart adaptation. It's so very clearly, in fact, they even call it out at several points, that it's clearly based on A Christmas Carol, but it is so intelligent and creative and well acted. It doesn't matter that it's a clear lift like that. So, to those out there worrying about originality, I mean, again, please don't copy someone else's work, but as long as you're not, like, literally copying pasting someone's work, don't worry so much about originality in characters and plot and whatever. Just tell a story that is interesting to you, that, has come together and put together in your own head. I mean, I like randomly, to avoid that, I like randomly Googling things, names and little, like, plot details from my book, just to see if, I pulled something accidentally, but otherwise, you're fine. And in terms of, imposter syndrome, take it a day at a time. Write, like I said, look up some interviews with some people in your field and see just how many people have imposter syndrome and deal with it, and just, as much as possible, try to put it aside and creating. As someone a lot smarter than me once said, you know, you can edit a bad book, but you can't edit a book that doesn't exist. So put those words to paper, put that pencil or paint or whatever to canvas, record a song even on your phone. Once it's out there, you can edit it, you can edit it and make changes later if you are not happy with it, or you want to bring it in more in line with your vision or fix typos, or you know you feel you maybe copied something a little bit and you want to make it a little bit different. It is so much easier, if perhaps a little more tedious. I'm going to have some videos coming up soon on editing, but perhaps a little more tedious, but it is far easier. You can edit something that exists. You cannot edit if you just keep it in your brain. So get out there, be creative, kick that imposter syndrome, if not to the curb, then, stick it in its own little closet and try not to let it out to play in your brain. Um, as always, I like to end these videos, since I'm talking about mental health. This one's a little bit more around like creatives, but if you're struggling in any way, big, small, whatever the form is, if you're struggling in any way with your mental health, please seek out help and use your resources, whether that be therapy, pharmacology, friends, family members, your animals. Like, seek out help. We're all in this together. We should all be helping out each other, and there are great resources out there if you look for them. I look forward. Please, I would love to hear your own thoughts on imposter syndrome and sort of some of the things you've done to work hard and overcome that. I'll have some links down below. As usual, I like to end with a little plug of, please buy my books. They're both available on Amazon and linked below: The Shadow of the Past and The Sun Burned Red. Please like, share, subscribe. I would love to hear from all of that and see where, what thoughts you have, and for you to share it and share your thoughts on this. But in the meantime, I do hope you all have a wonderful day and you get a chance to do something creative. Catch you on the next one.